The competitive 40K network presents Art of War. Art of War. Strategy and tactics. Discussions with the best players on the planet. Now your host, Nick Nanavati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Art of War podcast. I'm your host, Nick Nanavati, and this week we have a really awesome special guest from the WTC, the best general of the entire tournament, David Gaylard with his Thousand Sons. David, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, man. Nice to be back.
Yeah, congratulations on a really impressive run and on your home team of New Zealand. I love the fact that you're from the UK, but you play for New Zealand. That's got to be so challenging, dealing with time zones, talking to your team. We'll talk about all that stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. No, thanks. Yeah, it was a nice accomplishment. It wasn't really expected, but I had the good fortune of the stars kind of aligning across the whole tournament for once. And I was lucky enough to come on with that title. Yeah.
Well, it's not just about the individual performance, but we're all going to cover that in detail. But your team also was, fantastic this year. I will say, it's one thing to be best general of the 35th placing team and be like, I'm the best player and I smashed all the not great players. But no, I mean, you guys you came in 9th out of 40. This is the highest you've ever come. You are, based on seeding math, they're going to be a tier 1 nation next year. Congratulations. That's really well done.
Yeah, thanks. Last year, for those that don't know, it was New Zealand's first year, and we managed to come 15th and won the best newcomer that year. And then this year we'd finally had coaches from New Zealand. We had 11 traveling players, which is the furthest distance that any team travels from anywhere in the world to play. So it's a big logistical effort and commitment for the team. So it was awesome to have the team come across this year, and we got 9th place, which exceeded my stretch goal for the team. Most importantly, we won best sportsmanship as well with 7 out of 7 votes. So, I mean, in my opinion, the best sportsmanship stuff is the most exciting thing.
No, I was going to say that's the word I honestly am most excited for as well. Best sportsman in a team event is exceptionally hard because it doesn't matter if you have a couple great sports. You have one bad apple ruins the whole thing. You have all 7-8 games. You have so many players across them. You really it speaks to your character as a nation. I love that. Yeah,
the guys are super awesome. Really lovely bunch of guys, and a lot of them it was their first time traveling to. Sometimes it's the first time traveling to Europe. They're certainly their biggest tournament they've played, and their first WTC for 5 out of about 8 players as well. So, sometimes they were getting smashed 20-0, and they were just, still great people to play against nevertheless. So, and it's quite a high bar for WTC as well. As I'm sure you know, Nick, and everyone who's attended WTC, it's a really sportsman-like event. It has the best sportsmanship out of any event I've played consistently. Everyone is just a gem to play against, despite there being arguably the most on the line. So it's really awesome to see, and super, super proud about it. Hopefully we can replicate it next year.
That was absolutely my experience as well. But David, don't let me get ahead of myself. We got to do the intro before we talk about this amazing experience. So, folks, this is part 1 of a 2-part show. And this part, we're going to get to go on David a little more. We're going to talk about his experience playing Thousand Sons for New Zealand. We're going to talk about this rising star coming out of literally the other hemisphere of the planet. 2 years ago, best newcoming team. That's really impressive. There are a lot of teams that come every year, and veteran teams do super well into new teams and all that, and they held their own. And now getting 9th place, tier 1 nation in 2 years, this is literally unheard of. This trajectory is insane. David, I'm sure, has got a big part of that. So we're going to unpack all that, his list, how it all works. And then in part 2, the second half of our conversation, which is available to our patrons, patreon.com/AOW40K. You can access to our Discord server, this part 2, 250 plus other part 2. So much content. You got to get there. We're going to talk about all of David's matchups, the pairings, the processes, and how he literally slaughtered all of his opponents with Thousand Sons. Arguably the best army in the game, played by one of the best players on the planet. You don't want to miss that conversation. All right, David, let's do it. Let's get into it. Tell me about your preparation and what it's like being on Team New Zealand and also being in the UK. How do you make that work and what's it like?
Yeah, I'll tackle the second question first. So I've lived in New Zealand for most of my life, 25 years, and I've lived in the UK for the last 4 years in London here, and I've been a big part of the UK scene, I guess you could say. It's where I started playing Warhammer, and despite living in and wanting to live in the UK for the foreseeable future, it's still really important for me to play for my home nation. It always gives me the feeling of, this is the nation to play for. Whenever the All Blacks are playing, I'm a big supporter. So
I love
that's why I always chose to play with New Zealand, despite obviously Team England having a fantastic team and a great bunch of guys there as well. But yeah, it can be a little bit challenging because we have a significant time zone difference. So most of my work I do with the team this year has been through Finn Decker, through our captain. Finn and I both applied to be the captain last year, and I was a little bit downtrodden when I didn't receive the captaincy, but it all worked out for the best in the long run because Finn did an absolutely amazing job, an incredible guy at organizing and rallying the team and the community in New Zealand. And then I primarily focused on supporting where I could as best as possible. So Finn and I worked pretty closely together, from kind of player selection to list optimization to kind of list design across the matrix and the roles of each player as well. So I think like I've also got a pretty big role in the pairings as well. So I quote unquote main pairer, but we have a team of 3: Finn, myself, and a guy called Dan Hayden that assist with the pairings when it comes down to actually doing it at the tournament there. So it's a team effort on all those fronts, and it's really a team effort across all the fronts. So it's quite. I'm quite happy how I've been able to gel and insert with the guys in New Zealand, and they're super open to ideas, really good to work with, and they, a lot of the guys appreciate that I bring obviously a lot of experience and expertise. At the same time, I know a lot of people networking, and I know what the European scene is like. So I kind of see my job in the team as making sure that people aren't, in for a big surprise, so to speak, and making sure that, I'm bringing the other half, kind of the Northern Hemisphere perspective to things as well. Because we also do a lot of our own thinking. We're in a collaboration this year with Iceland and Belgium. But the guys tend to do a lot of their practice within New Zealand as well, and we did practice in scrims over TTS as well. But we're kind of like Australia, so to speak, in that sense. We've got our own meta, and those guys kind of understand that. So being able to blend our own style of playing Warhammer with the style that and kind of expertise I can lay on top of that is what I think is a big part of our success this year. Yeah.
That's really exciting. I know historically we always looked at Australia's list and we're like, what is going on over there? They had pants on their heads. And for many years it was true until they won the tournament and everyone was like, oh shit, Australia. And it seems like it's obviously working for them, having these unorthodox approaches. And we've discussed that in episodes in the past, like, it's part of their approach to the game and all those things. It sounds like as New Zealand, you kind of have a similar different approach than like mainstream America or US. Since you have a blend of both styles, David, how did that kind of manifest itself in list creation and team composition?
Yeah, so in our preparation phase, we definitely knew that last year. So yeah, I'll go on with the preparation I did and then the team. So I'll start with the team first. We knew that there were so many things about the improvements that we needed from last year. So that was really exciting because last year, 15th best newcomer, we knew that we almost didn't prepare very much at all. Granted, it was a very different meta and everything, but we knew that there were so many things that we could do just to simply improve the preparation process. We had different players coming in as well, which made an impact, but we knew that scrimming teams, having boot camps, doing matrix simulation pairings, list optimizations, having defined roles and everything like that these were all very direct and basic areas which we think we can improve upon. So that was one of our direct focuses as a team, is improving probably on those core parts. And one of those big ones is, which I'll go into as a player, is understanding the players on the team, what their not skill level, but their play preference is. And how that aligns with the general roles that you need within any given team, I think. So just at the most basic sense, having defenders, having pushers, and having all-rounders with some tech in each direction. It's really good as a team if you can identify which players want to play like that, because you don't really want a defensive player who primarily excels in defending, playing a role where they have to crush and table their opponent as fast as possible. So that was a huge part of the team prep, is making sure that we've got the people on the right list that gel with them. And then obviously, scrimming, getting the guys playing against European opponents and exposing them to European ways of thinking was a really big one. So I'd say our preparation was good. It was probably a 5 out of 10 last year. and we're probably at a 7 out of 10 this year.
You got harsh rankings. I'm looking at your success. You beat your stretch goals. I'm looking at this as like, our preparation 10 out of 10.
I mean, it's always easy to look back at things that rose into glasses.
Oh, hindsight is so real this tournament.
Oh
my God, it feels so bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's a caveat, and we can go into this later, is that there is also a caveat around the placings at WTC. I think a lot of people look, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but there's so much context at the WTC. The run path that you have is really important as well. So we can get on the channel with that later. But myself as a player, I knew that I've got a pretty diverse range of armies that I've played in the past, and I've been pretty open just to picking up an army and playing it. I play for Team Ignite, and we play team tournaments with the team. We've got 8 out of 8 WTC players on our team, so I'm pretty exposed to the ways of thinking for this is the best list or whatever like that. Not that we share lists, but I'm constantly around those ways of thinking, so I can pull up a list, look at recent tournaments, and design a list quite well. But early on, I wanted to play Tyranids. Actually, they got the buff for the balanced data slate. So actually, a month before Warhammer, the balanced data slate, I didn't play any Warhammer at all. I played Marvel Crisis Protocol. Which is it's a pretty fun game. It's a bit pick up and go, but I knew that I wanted to just take some time to divest from Warhammer, knowing that once the balanced data slates hit, it would be a huge push after that, and I would be basically having the pick of any army I wanted on the team, apart from Marines there as well. So balanced data slate comes around, I start playing Tyranids. The first thing I started playing was Crusher Stampede with big monsters and stuff, and I was winning some games here and there, but I played practice games with Brian Sipe from your team, Team USA, because we live close and we're on the same team. And Brian was crushing me. And in the back of my head, I kind of knew, Tyranids are good and I could do well with them, but it's not the army which would best facilitate my ability to play my role on the team. And I made that mistake last year. I played Deathwatch when I probably should have played Aldari or GSC. Big high expression armies that really can push for 20s constantly. Whereas I was a bit hampered by the army faction. So one of my goals this year was going into it was I need to be on an army that suits my role, and I need to be on the best army for that. So Thousand Suns, didn't really get nerfed much at all. And I played it 1 or 2 games in the past. So I was like, great, this is the way to go. So I just committed up to it after that.
It's fascinating you describe this as your role. And it basically, I love where you're coming from in terms of team dynamics. You want to have like the people who are naturally more defensive be the defenders. The people who push for 20s get to be on the aggressive armies. I love that. And I know historically, David, you come on the show, you've talked about playing Astra Militarum, which I don't think of as an army that goes and gets 20s and these huge scores. And last year you played Deathwatch, which kind of is a good singles army. It'll fight for like 12s. But the Eldar and the GSC of the world were getting the 20s last year. This year you picked Thousand Suns. And I'm struggling to see, I guess, like how a guard player historically, Astra Militarum, identifies themselves as someone who gets 20s or is well suited for that role, and then picks an army that's like Thousand Suns when obviously did spectacularly. And I guess that's part 2 of this conversation. But when I look at everyone else's 1000 scores, for the most part, they're getting like 13s, 14s, that middling style win. They're not getting these enormous scores. So what's the triangle there? How does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I did 20 a lot of people with guard.
Maybe I'm just wrong. That works too.
No. I mean, it's interesting. So I think that you can, you do make a good point, which actually, so I've played a lot of games, some games on stream where I played guard, very defensively, playing the mission, especially in a very singles orientated format. I think just in general, I'm a pretty flexible player. I can play defensively, I can play offensively, but the energy I get out of the game is definitely from playing big games, pushing for big wins, if you know what I mean. Like that's where I'm
excited. Yeah.
That's where I'm in my element, right? Like I'm playing my best. I'm thinking about the right things. I'm, excited. I'm, because it's a multi-day format tournament as well. So you want to play something which you're going to enjoy as well. I think that's a big part where a lot of people might overlook sometimes. But if you're going to be playing a full
let me
day
harp on
tournament,
that really quick.
Yeah.
I totally agree. My sister's list was super strong, but it actually kind of bored me. Like I spent most of my games like threatening to shoot you if you exposed yourself and you didn't. So we like just had a very sad, boring draw. And like 6-7 games of that over the course of 4 days, it gets repetitive. It does.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. So having something that kind of really gels with you is a big part of you as a player, right? Because Warhammer is a mental, and man, I mean, I think the level of preparation and competitiveness that we see these days, you could call it a sport, right? And these teams are putting in a full-time job's worth of work on top of that. So the levels that you play at, I think it's important to look at that mental health and mental side of things in terms of playing something that you're going to be able to, facilitate your play style to the best abilities as well. So that's the full package, I think, which is playing something that you enjoy melds well with how you enjoy playing the game and is going to facilitate your role as the role needed on the team. And Thousand Suns was that. I think potentially, Blood Angels was up there as well. Dark Angels maybe, but I wasn't playing Marines. And then it was maybe Tyranids, but there was a big gap, I think, between Thousand Suns and Tyranids if I wasn't playing Marines, for example.
Right. So you landed on Thousand Suns. You were assigned the role to get big wins and basically got paired into it, and then you delivered the role, which is all you can ask for. And that's a job well done. Congrats on that one, for sure. How was the rest of the team's composition and preparation? What was like your team comp and your pairing strategy?
Yeah, what I would say is for those that are playing team tournaments, you don't necessarily have to have your team aligned like what am about to say. I don't know if Team USA has that kind of specific sword and shield role per se. I don't. Maybe a team like France doesn't, for example. Do you guys have that in Team USA, Nick?
We basically have 4 different categories for armies. Like there's the defenders, which you put them out first, they defend. There are like blunters, which usually go out as attackers, and they're there to keep the defenders from scoring a million points if it's like a very scary defender. And then there's like designated attackers, something like Anthony's World Eaters. Like this is here for specific matchups. It's going to crush them. You pair them that way. You don't pair them into the things it doesn't do well into, and that's what you do. And then there's like all comers list, singles list. These are like akin to like Thousand Suns or Dark Angels, like just the best armies in the game type of thing.
Yeah, you could put them down third defender, and then they're probably going to get a big win or something like that.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So like you said, I mean, a lot of teams have different ways of looking at it, and I think that the higher up in the tier list of teams and team strength you go, that probably changes a lot from having swords and shields to having everyone is capable of doing a role at any given time, sort of thing, right? So I think there is some team context into that, and it's important just to be also pragmatic, I think, right, with your team, your players. We had 5 out of 8 people coming to play their first WTC. So I don't expect people to come to their first WTC and just absolutely crush people, right? It's a huge learning curve, especially if you've never even played in Europe before. So I think being pragmatic and thinking about player experience, and that's not to say that players are worse or better than others. It's just
experience matters, right?
Yeah, it really does, right? You're going to be playing against players whose ethos is probably a lot different from you've ever played against, right? Like, you've played in your local club, but have you played against Germany players, or have you played against Dutch players, for example, right? Like they have a way that they play the game as well, and that might catch you off guard, for example. And then hopefully it doesn't. But I think I always expect people to be a little bit caught off guard because it's a very different environment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love watching the shock of all of our new academy players like play at the singles War Master event for the first time and things like that, because they're like, I can't believe how hard this tournament is. Everyone plays so good. It's like the finals of every tournament, every round. And I'm like, yeah. And these are the guys who aren't playing in the team event.
yeah, exactly. It's literally the best players of Warhammer in the world, all in one room, which is great. But
it's such a once in a lifetime or once in a year experience. And there's nothing else like it. Yeah,
for sure. So the team composition. So we have we had a couple of decision points here. We knew that there were some lists that we really wanted to play, and we had a couple of people flip-flop on the back end that we had to juggle between one or two factions. I think every team probably goes through the same spirals, or for lack of better words. So we had 2 primary pushes. It was myself and a guy called Jonty Larson, who's an exceptionally good player. He's playing our double monolith Silent King build. So Jonty actually came 5th undefeated in the War Masters event, and I think he was maybe 12th or he was a top 20 scorer as well with the Double Monolith Silent King Necron build. So that was a big decision point in our team composition of whether or not we put Jonty on a list that is more skewed but can push for larger wins and is a lot more trickier, the Double Monolith build, or like a list like Tau, which we thought maybe is a bit better all-rounder. So we decided to really lean into our ethos is that Jonty and I will push, and we're going to have lists that are a bit more skewed, and that will allow us to do that role even more. So, looking back on it now, that worked out really well, and we got a bit lucky there. So we had those kind of roles, and we had defender lists. So we had Dan Hayden. I'm going to remember everyone's name, hopefully. We had Dan Hayden playing Synaptic Nexus with Tyranids. We thought that was a really good list just to kind of grind 8, 9s, and 10s, 11s, 12s in some matches on an open board. Then we had Cameron playing Grey Knights. He was playing the 5 NDK Terminator and 10 Terminator Drago list, and that was a good list for us overall, for sure. It was a little bit more pushy than we would have wanted, so maybe a bit more all-rounder there would have been better. We had Michael playing Sisters, the Bringers of Flame, more or less all the same. Sisters were great the whole tournament. I think they would just play into anything and have a game, and they were exceptionally good into some armies as well at the same time. So your Matrix probably looked a whole lot like 3.5s. We weren't playing Valgons either, so that was a big decision point we made. I felt that it was better not to play Valgons, and it made the list a lot more dynamic and harder to play against. So what do you think about that, Nick?
I didn't run Valgons either, and I completely agree with your take. Basically, my Matrix had a couple reds. There were 3 armies I didn't want to play. Most of my Matrix was just draws, like draws with some upside. Most of it was upside, but a little bit downside here and there. And that's assuming they play it super conservatively and hide behind walls. If they let me shoot them, they're gone. Yeah. And then there's some armies that just can't stop it, and then those are my big wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We then had Hayden, who was playing Eldari. We wanted Eldari. We wanted some kind of haywire mechanism to play as a first as an attacker early on. I think Eldari was a little bit disappointing for us, probably likewise for you guys as well.
I think it was disappointing for every team who brought Eldari.
Yeah. We had Liam VSL and within the collaboration as well, which I think has a big influence there as well.
Definitely.
But Hayden had played Eldari. It was kind of an army he was really comfortable on, and we had Liam and Ison also playing Eldari. So that's the kind of group think going there as well. We had me on Thousand Suns. We had Findecker, our captain, playing Blood Angels. And we had, then we had Alex Taus playing World Eaters. And I thought World Eaters was actually really good this tournament. Really happy with it. It had the ability to... So World Eaters was probably one of our... World Eaters, Blood Angels, and Sisters were probably our mid, early attacking lists. Sort of blunt, etc. They can play into anything. And then because our Blood Angels list was quite rounded, which probably is a mistake in hindsight, we all agree. But World Eaters, we thought, can have a lot of play into some things. And actually, if you have an early round prediction, you can tell your World Eaters player to have the go turn. And that's actually a mechanism outside of any game where you can decide to try and push for either a win or, if you're on a high side of a draw, for example, you can do that to say, look, we're going to try and go for a win here. Or you can play safe if you're on a low side of a draw. So a bit of a unique part of that army, given the fact that it can go all in on one turn.
I love that you even highlight its pace of the game, if you will, and how it can just like flip a switch and turn on and to change the dynamic of the match, get a different score outcome. That's such an underrated thing in the team environment. I think it's something that in last week's episode, we were talking to John Lennon about Team America, and he highlighted that as our lists weren't really... And not even our list. Our coaching wasn't set up to enable for easy transitions in game flow like that, or well-communicated transitions in game flow. And it's just so fascinating to see the things that people value in teams and how different they are. Like, we're not just talking about like this relic is really powerful. We're talking about like this army has a mechanic which lets it time its go turn differently than everybody else, which is a tool within the round itself. It's a very fascinating tournament,
Yeah, a super volatile army as well. So you've got potential for some matches which you're playing for an 8 to sometimes be a 15, right? They miss position slightly, then they fail a leadership check and can't fall back. Then all of a sudden it's completely game on as well. And that can put a lot of stress on the other team as well, I think.
It looks like your team is pretty well-rounded. Like you have like Grey Knights is a great blunter, Necrons is a great blunter. Tyranids, they're a solid defender. Eldari, regretful but solid defender. And then World Leaders is a hyper-focused attacker. Nothing wrong with one or two of those. And then you've got your well-rounded Blood Angels, Sisters holding the line, Thousand Suns cleaning up for huge wins. I love it.
Yeah, we were pretty happy with our team composition all round. Last year we really wanted to work on that. I think our lists probably still resemble a bit of the singles mentality, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If you really look into some of our lists, our Grey Knight list could probably be a little bit more skewed, perhaps, towards what we needed. Our Blood Angels could have just had all teeth, no transports, right? And then our Eldari list could have been even more skewed potentially here, or played something else. So I think there's some optimization, and I think no team gets that 100% right. It's really difficult because as the tournament goes on, you understand the role that your armies have more and more as well, right?
Well, it's not only that, but like there's such a spectrum of opponents these days. Like it's not like the same 10 armies, all of which have one archetype. Like you could have 4 different Space Marine chapters. Some teams, and Space Marines are great, but like the armies are within each team are different. Like we brought orcs, like that was wild card. Like a lot of teams had an unexpected faction or two.
Yeah, and we played against Austria, and Kev had Ironstorm, right? So just
go back to that.
Yeah. And Ironstorm, a bit of throwback, but it was a good list.
Ironstorm's still good. It got worse, but did it get worse to the point that it's useless? No, not at all.
I didn't want to play that on an open board.
Right. And it opens up so many things that you would assume are like not good or not good in singles, right? Like Lucas's list had 25 flash kits in it, or Orc Army. What even is that? But it created a lot of problems for people.
Yeah. And I think everyone at WTC knows that, this WTC was so close. The margins were so thin this WTC. I think if you look at USA round, didn't you guys lose by 1 point twice or something?
We have a 3-point loss to Poland and a 1-point loss to France.
To the champions. Which is any swing in any game. Yeah. Brian's game swinging or something like that, right? I mean,
like 1 point. Every single person has a story of a tactical decision or a dice roll gone sideways, which accounts to 1 point. That's one objective. That's one secondary. Yep.
One draw of a card different. It's the margins are so thin these days, and it's so competitive. We were very worried. I was worried that it was going to be very difficult to push a win in this meta in general. So I was happy that we came to a solution to that, somewhat, of having kind of 6 all-rounders. 6 people that can play for whatever, and then 2 big pushes that we alley-oop every single pairing, basically. Yeah.
It seemed to have worked really nicely. So let's kind of transition it over to like what your list was and how it all works on the table. What was your Thousand Suns list, David?
Yeah, so I had a bit of an interesting one. So I worked a little bit with Brian from your team as well. And early on when I saw the balance data, I too was looking at the 3 Mutolith Beasts because I thought they were already playable before and their data sheet was incredibly good. And then Brian just sold me on them even more. So Brian and I tested quite a bit together. And then we kind of diverted paths on the last 300 points at the very end there with 2 kind of different philosophies. What I would say is there's a lot of Thousand Suns lists out there. My goal was to have the best list, but my list is maybe the best in one context, right? My list was very good for if I had all the pairings, all the tables I wanted, my pick of the litter 100%. But other people's lists, like maybe Vix or Seiko's or Arna's, I'm really good at playing. They played harder rounds than me. They played the mirror, for example. I didn't even play that because I just said, look, I don't want to have a chance at a flip game or whatever.
Yeah, right. You got to be babied a little bit.
I got 100% babied the entire time, right? So there's a lot of context when it comes to looking at top individual performer. Realistically, before I go into the list, there's 40 teams at the WTC. So there's probably between 60 and 80 people that are even competing to begin with for that top spot of the highest individual placing, and Olivier scored 4 more points than me. So and realistically, of those 40 to 80 people, how many of them are in teams where they're going to excel to be able to do that? Probably half. So you're talking about 20 to 40 people, and how many of them have the exact pick of whatever they want to play on what boards? You're probably talking about 10 to 15 people in the entire tournament. So I kind of think of it as I bet 10 to 15 other people. But it's still really, really close, all those razor thin margins as well. So I thought my list was the best at basically playing on the table I want, on the matchups I want. But there are a lot of great lists out there as well. That
So was your job kind of like first defender, like pair anything into me, I will kill it?
Yeah, so my role was so typically the most attacking position is the third defender position, primarily because you play your first defender. So this is our pairing strategy was very similar to this. We would have our early defenders, which we knew, and we would try and pull out whatever was good against Jonty and myself. Then Jonty would attack into some matchups, or I would attack into things that I knew were going to be a 15 plus in the first or second slot. But often I didn't attack at all because a team that would mean that I wasn't in the matrix for the team to worry about. And there is a bit of a personality approach to this as well, right? Like it's fair to say that on New Zealand, I'm very well known, and I was very open with I'm here to score the most points as possible for my team. So that's a bit of context too, in terms of like people know what my role is, etc. So to put me out early would kind of make it a lot easier for the other teams to pair their matrix into us afterwards.
Right. It also like it says something, to make that claim, like I'm here to get the easy points and then be coddled into easier matchups or get your table choice to do it. But I have watched a lot of people get that treatment and then not deliver the points, and then your team is kind of banking on those points, and then you're that guy who really has a loud mouth and nothing to back it up. But you backed it up here, David. I gotta say.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you still got to play the game, which is a big part of it. So yeah, back to your point. I would often be the third defender. We would take out armies that were good against me and Jonty, so that I would only have 4s in my matrix. So my matrix in general was basically 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Which for me, a 3 is 10 range, 4 is 15 plus. So my matrix, just in all honesty, was more or less 80% 15 plus matchups. And then I would never play anything almost lower than a 4, more or less.
And that's given the context that you get to make these kinds of choices as well.
100%. Yeah, I'm probably the main pairer as well. So that all goes into it. But like you said, you still got to deliver as well. And the reality is that actually I knew that this would probably be the case because, a guy called Liam VSL, arguably the best player in the world, maybe. Belgium is a little bit like this as a team as well. They have Liam, who's obviously a phenomenal player, and a lot of teams' approach to playing against a team where they have a player like that is to blunt them as hard as possible, right?
Right. So like don't let, if their strategy is Liam gets 20s, let's make our strategy Liam gets a 10.
Exactly, or Liam gets a 15 or 14 or etc. Right. So that was my full expectation. So I was going into games thinking I need to get 15 plus every game, which is a tall order to ask for as well, because every opponent you play against in this context is also trying to just play for 5 points. And as I think we all know, when your opponent's just playing for 5 points, it's a lot different than if your opponent was actually playing the game, where it can then blow out or snowball. So.
Right. So your matrix is accounting for them playing super defensively, trying not to give you those points that, they're going to lose. They're not even trying to fight you over the win. They're trying to fight you over the margin of win.
Exactly. And that's the right approach for a lot of ways to play against Thousand Suns in this tournament, because a lot of people mistake Thousand Suns when they play against them. They interact with the army way too much. And Thousand Suns is kind of an army of like, whatever's in the open is dead. And then I'm going to kill a little bit more on top of that. And so if your opponent just doesn't interact with you at all, you have to come to them. And then, you have to manage their threat ranges. You chip it away at them a little bit. But if your opponent just sits back and does nothing, it's much more harder to get big wins. So
I totally agree. I mean, not to distract from the conversation, but I played your buddy Vic Vijay, and he's what a gem of a human. But we had a great game in which I did literally nothing for 4 turns, and then Vic got frustrated that he was not getting more than 10 points out of this and just ran at me.
Yeah. So if Vic was playing my list, this would work out a bit better. But the list design all focuses around that, more or less, that I would probably be trying to crush people as hard as possible. So how can we make the elements of Thousand Suns that enable people to play stalely against you? How can we alleviate and change those, right? So here's the list. No Ahriman, 3 Exalted Sorcerers on disc, and I've got the Forbidden Law on the Exalted Sorcerer on disc. This lets you do the second Cabal ritual. So you can have a fast-moving target or fast-moving unit that can then be within range of a Mutalisk Beast to 36-inch range Doom Bolt. So you're double Doom Bolting very easily in my list. Then we've got 3 Sorcerers on disc, 3 Infernal Masters, 1 with Crystal for teleport, and another with Arcane Vortex for just the best gun in the game, basically.
Yeah, more damage.
Oh, he's the best. And then just 1 regular guy. He's the most efficient points for Cabal. And in addition to that, the flip mechanic is insanely good. and I didn't want to play him over a lone op sorcerer because I thought the lone op sorcerer was terrible. But once again, depending on what matchups you want to play, and then of course Magnus, because Magnus is basically like a 440 point knight that never dies and tables your opponent. So, you should play Magnus.
Yeah.
Got 15 rubrics, the standard loadouts, 10 cultist and 2 spawn, Chaos Spawn, and then 3 Mutalith Beasts. So the big part of my list is that I've got 3 Mutalith Beasts, and then I've only got 2 units of chaff. The rest of it
you're
is
just really light on rubrics, right? Or you have 15. Did I miss that?
I've got 15, yeah, but most
okay.
lists probably that are playing 1 beast playing 20 to 25. But I'm really light on chaff. I've got just 10 cultists and 2 spawn. That's it. So a lot of other people will be playing like a couple of units of Zangor Enlightened. So my total chaff package is like 120 points, whereas a lot of people will be playing in that 200, 210 mark.
If you are listening to this, it probably means you play Warhammer 40k. And if you're playing Warhammer, you know you need a lot of dice. Baron of Dice is where we get our dice from. They produce amazing different kinds of dice. We just recently got all kinds of different faction dice shipped to us, which we use on our stream games. But not only do they look really cool, but they're highly customizable. You can get different symbols, corners that are square, corners that are round, different shapes and sizes, different sided dice. It's all the rage. And they're customizable in color and design as well. They are so cool looking. Not only that, but they feel great to roll in your hands. I've never held dice that roll and feel this good. Not only that, but they are scientifically perfectly balanced. There are tons of case studies on people rolling thousands of dice and recording all the results that they get. And sometimes you might get a die that rolls just a few too many ones. We've all had to throw it out before. These dice are not like that. They are perfectly balanced to a T, thousands of rolls, perfect distribution. If you want to take your Warhammer game seriously and make sure the dice are not screwing you over, get some Baron of Dice.
So how do you actually score points with this army? Like primaries, secondaries? I mean, without chaff, you're going to struggle to interact on those fronts. You're going to have to use your rubric squads with your characters attached to hold primary. Then they're going to get themselves killed. How do you actually play the game?
Yeah, so the best way to create differentials in this meta, I thought, going into the tournament, most people were going to just be playing tactical 100% of the time. And if your opponent's got a better tactical army than you, then that's not a way that you can create any differential, right? So in my opinion, the best way to create differential is to stand on objectives. And turns out a Mutalith Beast does that really well.
Yeah, it does.
it's the exact type of profile, and I'm sure you've played against Brian where this has happened, where, it's a 5-up in fun, 5-up Field of Pain on a toughness 10 model, and you're kind of
bunch
just like,
of wounds.
Yeah, you're just like the equivalent wounds it has is like 20 wounds equivalent, right? On a 5-up in run. So it's pretty brutal. Basically, it's 13 wounds and a 5-up, 5-up, more or less halves the damage that you take in general. So to push through, upwards of 26 damage through a beast is pretty tough. Not to mention if you... Yeah, and there's 3 of them, yeah. Not to mention the gun's really good, the aura's really good, you can temporal surge them, and they have OC4 as well. So, they're really, really good at creating, taking your opponent off primary and then holding your primary and making it unbreakable as well. So the primary differential was the main way in which I targeted most armies to create kind of differentials as well.
So you're pushing 3 Mutalith Vortex Beasts onto the midfield objectives. It's on your opponent to do something about it. It's hard to do something about it, and they probably get themselves into line of sight of all your Rubric Marines, and Infernal Masters, and Magnus waiting behind the wings. And they get tabled.
Yeah, because like we talked about before, what you really want people to do is come and play the game. So what putting a Mutalith Beast does on an objective does is that, let's say, for example, playing against Sisters, right? If I put a Mutalith Beast on an objective, maybe outside your expansion objective or something like that, or threatening that, you need to bring your Castigators out to try and shoot them, or you might bring your Dominions out and try and pop a Melter, etc., right? Well, that's great, because now I've got 2 36-inch Doom Bolts and Magnus with rerolls extend range, and I've got an indirect target as well on top of that. So I'm killing 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces back probably the next turn, right? So that's really the key part. It gets your opponent playing the game, and if they don't play the game, then you can push to primary after that as well. So it was pretty successful. It really helps when you roll a lot of 5-up invuns, particularly if your opponent shoots like Dominion Melters at you and stuff like that, and they get 2 through, and then you just roll a double 5, and then all of a sudden that's like a 20-point game differential swing. So yeah, it helps that part. And then in addition to that, I also wanted to play at 19 Cabal points. So for all the people that don't play Thousand Suns, 19 Cabal lets you Doom Bolt twice and Temporal Surge at 100%. So at 19, you can always have your go turn reliably. And then I also wanted to have the Crystal, because having the Crystal makes it so your opponent can't just push everything forward and not care about any counterplay. When they have to play around the crystal on top of the beasts as well, they have to. It becomes really hard for them to utilize the assets in the ways which they optimally want to use them, because they have to play around crystal, teleport, surge, then grenade flame onto their key units like chaff and stuff like that as well. So you can imagine if you don't have the crystal, like if you're playing Sisters, Nick, you could just stage your whole army forward and not have to worry about any counterplay with a teleport mechanism, so to speak.
Right. So I totally get it. Basically, it's you want to not engage with the Thousand Suns, hold two objectives, and kind of score some secondaries, and just keep them honest. And then in doing so, you're going to lose primary to the Vortex Beast. You're going to have to engage them a little bit, even if you're just sacking units to go die, like you're sacking units to go die. And then you also have to worry about this Crystal Squad, which is an Infernal Master of 5 dudes. They deep strike 9 away. They can use Temporal Surge to move 6 inches, 5 inches closer. Like you said, grenade you. Their flamers hurt, and they can dominate your primary that way. Kill a key resource. Kill a bunch of your chaff squads all at once. So now you have no one to play the game with besides real things. It's a really dynamic tool here. So you're using it very aggressively. You're not like necessarily waiting until your opponent like runs out of screens late game.
No. I just if they leave an optimal play. Well, the reality is that everyone at WTC level is good enough to play around the crystal. But them playing around the crystal means that they're not bringing forward all their weight to bear on interacting with your Mutalith Beast, right? So because they have to play around the crystal, they then don't have all of the assets to then kill your beast, right? And the beasts are just super scammy, right? It's so easy to undercommit into killing a Mutalith Beast that, I mean, to kill a Mutalith Beast at 150 points, it probably takes 500 points of... Probably takes more than 500 points to actually kill outright. So that's really the good part about it too, is that often your opponent would commit into it, and then you would maybe bank your rerolls, and then they wouldn't kill it, and then all of a sudden they're in a really bad spot, because most of my games I would actually rapid ingress my last Mutalith Beast, so that
really, you'd rapid ingress this thing?
Yeah.
What is that? I thought Thousand Suns don't have CP to spare.
No, so they're super good from rapid ingress, because you can either defend your expansion objective reactively, or you can attack their expansion objective with OC4, right? Which is exactly the way that you want to play the game, right? You want to secure your expansion, you want to hit their expansion. So rapid ingress allows you to have that play up the back of your pocket and react.
So you're not jamming 3 Mutalith Vortex Beasts on 1, 2, 3 midfield objectives. You're kind of ignoring the center.
Yeah, so what I would typically do, let's say we're playing like a Scorched Earth maybe or something. All of the Hammer and Anvil maps at WTC are just the dream for Thousand Suns, so don't worry about that. But Crucible and Search and Destroy. Typically, I would stage my Mutalith Beast on my expansion objective tucked in behind ruins. Remember, I would also have board pick. So I would pick ruins that are flat against the board edge so that you couldn't scoot a tank down the side and see into my objective.
That's smart.
Then I would stage the spawn close up onto that objective, and then surge a Mutalith Beast, to say I went first, onto that objective outside it as well. Then I would stage a Mutalith Beast close to their expansion objective behind one of my ruins, where I could then move and temporal surge it onto their expansion objective, do some mortal wounds, shoot, and then if I don't have enough, I would send a sorcerer there to doombolt it to make sure that they never held their primary as well.
So then basically, you're attacking. You're not only holding your primary, you're attacking their primary. So they're just getting 5s while you're getting 10s, right, ideally.
Yeah, I mean, meanwhile, while this is happening, like Magnus is just killing whatever he wants with his staff, like looking over, the ruins, and your Exalted Sorcerer is going to indirect, and then I have 6 pieces of multi-damage psychic indirect with 10 points. So whatever big asset they were coming to attack my expo, I always had my Infernal Masters with Arcane Vortex within 18 inches to move and attack that back for the indirect. And then I always had a Sorcerer stage to attack their expansion objective in case I needed to Doombolt and indirect their expansion objective if I didn't have the OC to get it off with just a Mutalith Beast, for example. So, I mean, the army is extremely fast, which is great for it.
So it sounds like you've kind of got an amazing strategy here and like a super lethal, highly mobile army that can execute it. Mm-hmm. What kind of, you got to pick and choose your tables, your matchups, that kind of stuff to a degree. What matchups were you avoiding intentionally that we never got to see with this? What kind of stops this plan of yours?
Yeah, no, good one. Well, I think Dark Angels was definitely a matchup which I didn't want as well. So I'm just going to bring up my matrix here now.
Sure. Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Give me 1 second. So looking at it, so I didn't want to play T-Suns. So main reason here being is that my role is to get 15 plus points. And T-Suns is, It can have a big swing if you go first or second. You ideally want to go second, of course, because then you can secret mission the middle objectives, or you have more CP, you can react, and et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't want to play anything that was just going to be like, well, my opponent wins second, great, I'm out of the game. I'm out of scoring 15. And it's a pretty volatile matchup as well. Sisters was a very good matchup for me, so that was fine. Grey Knights with the very Terminator heavy, Liberian heavy lists, I wasn't going to be playing into. World Eaters I had as a 4, but again, if I could choose something else, it would be better than that. And then we had something that I didn't want to play. There's not a whole lot else out there realistically. I mean, there was some weird lists, like we played against an AdMech list, and I just said, look, I don't know what it does, so I'm not playing it. So there's some things like that where I just kind of vetoed, like I just don't want to play this. But in general, it's a pretty good matrix all around. The Mirror, Dark Angels, maybe some weird plane lists like a weird Tau list or a weird Dark Elder. I wasn't 100% comfortable with the matchup, so I just thought, look, if I'm not 100% comfortable with it, I'm not playing it, basically. So
yeah,
it's pretty hard to have a bad matchup, though.
Right. It's a pretty sound strategy, but you wanted like no questions asked in your pairing.
Exactly,
so
right.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
Is this like the type of strategy and type of list you would build for a singles environment, or would you alter it in some way?
Yeah, it's very different, man. I mean, I've played more singles than teams, really. Singles. So this strategy of obviously having an army that, I mean, obviously this army, if it got played today, this has been nerfed significantly with the indirect nerfs, but obviously this army is still really powerful. So it's still a good singles list, I would say, 100%. It allows you to fundamentally play Warhammer. It enables you to, take your opponent off objectives, you be on objectives, you have counterplay, and you've got threats, right? I don't like playing armies that have no threats, right? Like an army that's not like, oh, my opponent's got, this or that. Like, you've got Magnus, Crystal, and Sorcerers that can move 24 inches and indirect your opponent's army off the board. So, that's kind of what I'll enjoy playing. And I think any list that's really good in a singles environment has those threats to it, right? Whether that be, out OCing your opponent or having a great asset that can, like a real hammer unit, for example, right? So, yeah, in that sense, I still think it's a good, definitely good list. You might want to lean more into the terrain format that you're playing on. And I think my list in particular, you probably want to adjust for terrain format. So, still great singles army. There's no doubt about it. It's one of the best armies in the game still. But you want to adjust it primarily to the terrain format you're playing as well. I think it has quite a big impact.
Interesting. So terrain format's really the consideration here. What terrain situations cause change there?
Yeah, so usually it's the placing of the objectives. So whenever I look at a terrain format, I look at where the objectives are relative to the ruins. So are the objectives closed behind ruins? Can you hold them safely? Can you not? How close are the staging ruins to the back of the objective, for example? So, on UKTC, the new boards, for example. So on WTC, this list is fantastic because Magnus is fantastic on WTC as well. It's very angular staging, and Magnus has great lines of sight. So he's fantastic there. But maybe on UKTC or a terrain format where the ruins are very closed and you can hold objectives safely behind ruins, this might not be as effective, right? Because your opponent might have a better tactical army, and if they can secure their expansion objective, then you can't create kind of parity in the game there and try and beat them on that front, especially if they were to go first or second, for example. If they were to go second, for example, the secret mission or just in-game scoring in general. So you need to be able to start playing the game, and the terrain format will probably dictate whether or not you can do that with a list like this, I think.
Yeah, totally makes sense to me. Awesome, David. So I'm really eager to see how exactly you piloted this on the table, and that's really what we're going to talk about in part 2 of this conversation. But before we head there, I got one more question for you. If you had a piece of advice to give an aspiring Warhammer player, what would it be?
Oh man, geez, yeah.
Really putting you on the spot here.
Yeah. Well, we have a saying in our team, and this is kind of from Vic and I as well: win, lose, play well, and that's all that matters. You can play the perfect game and still lose, but you need to sit and win, lose, play well, but also reflect upon your games and then surround yourself with the right people, and that's the most direct way to improve. 100%.
I think that's great. It's a great piece of advice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your experience with Team New Zealand. Congratulations again on an amazing run, best general and best sportsman team. That is unheard of. Like, it really is. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Listeners, we're going to head over to part 2 of this conversation. That's going to be on our Patreon, patreon.com/AOW40K. For $5 a month, you can support this show. Really helps us keep the lights on, keep the podcast going. We have over 250 plus episodes, which you'll get access to when you subscribe, along with the Discord server where you can talk to me directly, or many of our guests, and also our excellent coaching team. We're going to go over there. We're going to talk about David's matches. Don't miss it.
Like what you just listened to? Check out Art of War Down Under and Art of War Unbroken on the competitive 40K network. The Art of War 40K.com.